What's up, YouTube? Back again with another video. In today's video, man, we're finally back to it, man. We're finally back to the My Book series, talking about the book that I'm writing. I know it's been a while, and just for the uploads in general, but for this series specifically. And I want to pick up my uploads more over the next couple of days, as well as do more of these videos for this series and try to catch up to where I'm at currently in the book writing, which is like chapter, I think, 31. But it's been busy, the grind, but we're almost done with the zombies grind, and then we move on to multiplayer. Multiplayer will take a little bit slower just because I'm not finna rush through the MP experience is just not fun in this game. Not as fun as it was on NW2. But with that being said, man, let's get into it. So last episode we left off with the second coming of the Exil forces, basically the 499th Ironclad Exil division, which was a right around 2 billion man or Exil infantry battalion that was scheduled to pretty much eradicate the human race. The Exil High Command was kind of over this war in Earth. They were kind of just like, yo, bro, just end this shit already. And so they came and they began their initial invasion. And we kind of touched about that in the last episode. So normally I have cliff notes for these videos, and usually I'll read through my chapters. I'll make cliff notes, specific things to discuss, and then I will give a little bit of reasoning behind that or whatever it may be. But this episode is going to be a little different, and you're going to see it very, very quickly. There's no cliff notes. This is going to be me going through the chapter, reading parts of it to you guys, and yeah, we'll kind of go from there. So this chapter is chapter 10, and it's called The End is Near. So this is a time in human history, especially during this war, that the realization that this is not going to be a quick victory really begins to settle in. Especially the losses and casualties up to this point and beyond this point do nothing but get higher and higher and higher and higher. Especially when you come down to later when we'll talk about the battles of New York, Los Angeles, Miami, DC again. I think DC is another battle I believe I have is set for 2. So there's a lot of casualties that begin to arise. So the end of the last chapter ends with the trench walls and seawalls being built in the United States. Because remember, America at this point is very, very concerned about herself. Which is kind of a normal thing for America. I'm an American and I love America, but it is a very normal thing for us to, when things get a little bit harder, we focus on ourselves first, make sure we're good, and then we go out and help the world. And that's very normal for a lot of countries, but specifically America is really known for that. Especially during the First World War, we were very focused on ourselves at the beginning, and that's why it took us so long to get in. We were so focused on ourselves that we didn't realize that the other countries needed America, like, they badly. So, meanwhile, after all that's happening in Germany, there is hell, and with firefights happening throughout Germany, as well as center streets in the cities. Some soldiers wrote that the sky is glowing from the fire of guns and explosives. There is no need for lights. You have to think back to a time in American, and not even just American history, or world history, when big conflicts were happening. One movie that I watched recently, Sisu, which is basically a guy who's a gold miner in, I believe, Norway, and he basically just kills a bunch of Nazis because they try to steal his gold. But one thing about the movie, even though the movie itself is fictional, one thing I really like about it is it demonstrates the power of a war happening a few thousand miles away, or even a few hundred miles away, and how much that impacts you at your home. Again, we've seen this here in Ukraine, as well as now as in Israel, with the current conflicts in those two countries happening, that it is you're very aware of it when you live in that area. And so in like the movie, he's looking over the horizon towards what I want to believe is towards the Germany half of Europe, that direction, and the war is raging, and you can see that even during the day you can see the explosions in the distance and the flashes of lights, because at the end of the day, a bomb is just a man-made item. So even though the sun is bright, if you do a large explosion a couple miles away, the flash is still very visible during the day, which I think is very, very interesting. And a lot of movies do that. A lot of movies like to think that it's just a blast wave, but there would be a flash of light from explosions. And so in this movie, he sees the explosions from the distance. And that's kind of what I wanted to describe in this soldier's recollection of that situation for them. I mean, they're on the ground, they're living there, fighting tooth and nails on every roadblock and every street, every house, every yard, every mountaintop in Germany. They're fighting to the very last. But one thing they've noted is like, you don't need lights here. We don't need electricity, because the explosions from one side blowing up another and the other side blowing up that side is so very aware and so very bright that it almost cancels out the need for electricity or fires or anything like that. And so these Ixil were different, right? These Ixil were very, very different. They were organized and they were focused. So the first wave of Ixil were kind of all over the place, really. When they attacked initially, they were kind of like, boo, we're scary and we're very powerful. We're just going to invade everything all at once and completely overwhelm you. But when it comes to actually holding the ground that we've invaded, we suck at it. Kind of very similar to the North during the American Civil War. We invaded the South during the beginning of the Civil War, but we weren't really great at holding ground. So what would happen a lot of times is either, even if we won battles, we would eventually just lose a battle, and we would lose all the ground we just regained. And the South is also very known for this. During the Battle of Gettysburg, they very quickly invaded the Pennsylvania farmland and took a large chunk of ground under Confederate control, and within a day, they lost everything. The Union was able to come back and regain control. And so these Ixils did the same thing. They were very unorganized and not very specific in what they were doing. On the other hand, the thing is, this new division was very organized, very focused. They specifically targeted the Middle East and the European area, and they also targeted Africa. Africa, you have to remember, Africa is a very important continent. A lot of people seem to forget it just because of how shitty life is in general there for a lot of people. Food, water is really hard to get, constant civil wars, invaders, pirates and slavery and all that type of stuff that happens there. And I'm not saying the people are, but the way of life is a lot more shittier than, say, the UK or Germany or even Russia or something. And so because the life is not that great, we assume that it's not a very good country or a very wealthy country. But there's a lot of things there that are popular. First off, I mean, the South African population is great. Their cities are good for the most part. I know they're having some political drama right now currently down there, but it's not a terrible country. But we also forget the geologicalness that is important about Africa. Africa is one of the first continents of the human genome. Africa was some of the first places where humans were first believed to have existed, and it is also home to many religions. I think even Christianity, in some form, started in Africa. So it's very important. So the Ixil knew this, right? Because the Ixil aren't stupid. They understand somewhat of our history. They understand somewhat of us. And so they basically annihilated Africa. They took complete control of it. And Africa will become a stalemate for pretty much the rest of the time of this story that I'm creating, because they will hold on to Africa for every ounce of their being. And there will be times where Africa may fall from the Ixil's hands and fall back into the EDF and U.S. government's hands, but it would never really fully can be controlled, and it'll become a lot of internal fighting, so mainly like guerrilla warfare and that type of stuff. And so these were very focused Ixil, right? And let's see here. So I want to make sure I'm reading this correctly for you guys. I just lost my page for some reason. It's doing like that. and they would focus on one country at a time. Germany drew the short stick, but thanks to the sacrifice, Germany, the EDF had time to kind of prepare. And so by 2078, Germany had fallen. Germany really did try their best. Germany would see upwards to 265,000 deaths in the first couple of days of the battle, and nearly 2.4 million deaths by the end of its life cycle. And Germany really did pay the ultimate price for everybody else. A lot of people sleep on Germany due to the fact of its rich, dark history, specifically with the Nazi Party and all that. But Germany itself sacrificed its entire livelihood, its peoples, its land to the cause of keeping humanity alive. The Exil really just they overwhelmed Germany, but Germany held on, and I think that's important to make note in this story, is that even the worst people, or the people that we think are the worst because of their history, aren't necessarily as bad as we even assume. And that is because that's the way the human mind works. We just assume, so, hey, these people were really bad back then, so they must be really, really bad now. Or they're not going to be as good as me because they did some bad things in the past. It's kind of the way the human mind works. But obviously is not how logic works. The Exil began to shift their focus to France after the retreating EDF forces. The EDF forces were able to hold them off at France for at least a time being. There was about 100 X-86 fighters intercepted a group of Exil bombers and erased them from the planet. So the X-86s became really, really good. They became a godsend, really, for the EDF. The EDF were able to send these unmanned fighters that had intergalactic capabilities that could go into space and fight, or come into Earth and fight. And because of this, they got really confident. They would send a squadron. So a squadron for the EDF would be around 15 jets. 15 of the X-86s could take down, theoretically, an entire battalion of the Exil fighters. Bombers were a different story, though. Bombers were massive starships type style ships that would hover right above the orbit of the Earth, and they would drop. So one thing I don't really describe in the book that I wish I kind of did, and I might have to start doing it, is the Exil don't use Earth bombs, right? They don't use the same type of explosives that we do. They don't use C4s. They don't use like 500-pound grain bombs or anything like that. They drop G-rods or J-rods or whatever you want to call them. These are a theoretical belief in humans, anyway, that it is theoretically possible to drop a long, sharp, pointy stick from Earth's orbit and drop it straight down onto Earth, and it will cause a massive explosion, actually causing a bigger explosion. Some say so big it would be like the size of a nuclear bomb, pretty much. Now, it's only theoretical. No one's, from what I've known, has ever actually tested this theory. I know there's been some small tests from scientists that have done small tests in the desert with smaller scales, but this is theoretically possible. And usually this theory would be launched from a satellite, but these Exil have learned how to do this from ships inside of orbit. And so they would use these, and so these ships were massive. So the Exil bombers were really well protected. Think of it as massive, think of it like the Call of Duty ships from Infinite Warfare, if you've ever played that campaign. The big the big battle cruisers that we have in space. Same thing, same idea. And so the EDF would send over 100 Exil 86 fighters, and they would actually do really, really good. So they would wipe out one of the entire bomb squadrons that was sent to France to bomb it, buying France some well-needed time to get people evacuated. With the word of the win spreading, the remaining forces returned to the front and began began the long, bloody French offensive. So the French offensive would last a really, really long time, and it would be really, really bloody. For some reason in my brain, and I think a lot of movies and stories and in history and real life too is the French really just get the wrong hand of the stick when it comes to a long, bloody, dug in offensive. Like throughout history, they have had so many occasions where they've been dug in their homeland, dug in, fighting this long, bloody war, which I think is kind of ironic because poor France, man, they are not having a fun time over there, man. Um, the EDF forces stood strong along some of the lines their great ancestors fought in the Great War in 1914 to 1918. With the French and EDF holding firm, America began sending troops to help, and within 6 months, the world was a well-oiled machine. Um, the Exil actually began worrying, so they began forming bases on Mars by the 2080s. They had about 20 billion on Mars. 20 billion of their forces. That is incomprehensible because if you think about it, Earth only has roughly around 8 billion. In today's world, during the war, Earth's population would drop from 10 billion to like 4.5, 5 billion. So almost quadruple that amount. Let's see. And the war began. The war became a bloodbath, so it would just become a constant bloody battles, no ground made. And by the June of 2080, the U.S. sent SEAL Team 9 were sent and 2 F-83 stealth intergalactic helicopters. These were based off the X-86s, but based for troop carrying, not fighting capabilities. They were sent to Mars to try and sabotage the Exil command. With 40 men, SEAL Team 9 landed and began their mission with them being better trained in space combat compared to the early days of the war. They were off to a better start and were winning in the beginning, and they managed to destroy 5 ammo depots. So remember, this whole idea was to send SEAL Team 9, let them do their thing, right? Because SEAL teams and Delta forces, their whole thing is to cause absolute panic within the enemy lines from behind. That's why we have them. Not only are they meant to rescue hostages or take out high-value targets, they're also, in times of war, are used to create absolute chaos. Because what you really want to do is say, hey, we're going to drop you behind enemy lines. We want you to make them think that they're losing their minds. Okay, make them be worried that they're going to be attacked from behind, so they focus on that more than their front. And that's kind of what SEAL Team 9 did. After their small wins, the SEALs go to their next target, which is a small military base, but on June 20th, they are caught and executed. Unfortunately for SEAL Team 9, having 40 men on a planet that has over 20 billion enemies was not a very good ratio. So they were caught and executed, and when the news got back to the EDF, they knew something was wrong. They had no idea the SEALs were attacking, so they started an investigation. The reason was simple: the Exil had no way of knowing that the SEALs would attack that base. One piece of evidence would change everything. A radio message from an EDF member to an Exil informant. With that, the EDF arrested the man and began rechecking all personnel. So the U.S. had sent the SEAL team, but the EDF did not. So the EDF had no idea that the SEAL team would be attacking yet. So the idea was the attack on the base would be paired with some aerial assaults from the EDF. Unfortunately, U.S. SEAL team decided to attack early, but something was wrong. The EDF knew it, because even though they shouldn't have attacked, there should have been no way Exil knew that the EDF and the U.S. Special Forces were going to attack that base at that time, and then they figured out there was a mole within the EDF ranks. And unfortunately, that mole was able to accomplish his mission and sabotage everything. Many in the story still don't know why people began to swap teams. And this is a common issue in wars throughout history, but this one was very odd because of the situation of wars in the world's in. But unfortunately, it is the truth that some of the EDF and US and humans decided to begin partnerships with the Exil. With the death of all 40 men of SEAL Team 9 were gone, and the world mourned, heroes were laid to rest. The war kept dragging on. The battles of St. Duke, the fight for the heartland of Italy, The fight for the Four Islands, Hill 77, took place by the end of 2081, with hundreds of thousands dead and missing. The world began losing hope, and with the defeat of the 22nd Corps Marines at the Battle of Twin Peaks in Washington State, the deaths became unwavering. But the power of human will never quit, wrote Adolph Park in a message to the public in the spring of 2083. I was going to say 2023, Jesus. And that's pretty much the chapter, man. It's a short chapter, quick one, just kind of fills in the gaps. And then we're going to go into the next chapter here in the next episode, in chapter 11, the final battle of the 2080s. And that's going to go over some battles in the 2080s towards the end. This early part of the book really jumps around a whole lot, actually, I should say. And that's because I really wanted to drive home that these wars are not, this war isn't just one big battle or a couple big battles. It's a lot of battles, a lot of small battles that get moved by a few big battles. And so while I'm focusing on the big battles now, I do plan to do a lot. Either next book or somewhere in this book, I want to do a chapter based on just a bunch of small battles from different years that happened. And we kind of went over a couple in there, the final battles of Twin Peaks, Hill 777, because these are all places that actually, a lot of these places have had battles happened before. And because of the reinvasion, they've happened again. So a lot of these guys who are, say you were born at the beginning of this war, and we're about 20-something years into this war, you theoretically, if you were an 18 or 19-year-old man, you could theoretically be fighting on the same battlefields that your father or grandfather fought on during this war. So it's very, very interesting to think about that way. And I think it changes the human psyche a little bit, because not only are you fighting for the survival of your community and for your world and for your family, but you're also fighting for your ancestor who may have failed on those previous battles, those previous fields. So, with that being said, guys, I hope you guys enjoy this video, man. I hope you guys are enjoying these like storybook videos. I know a lot of you guys either are interested in my book or not. That's perfectly fine. But the ones that are interested, I can do more videos like this. I can even do some other videos breaking down some other stuff. I would like to break down weapons or specific battles. If you have a specific battle you want to hear more about, like the Battle of Los Angeles, Battle of Miami, of New York, of DC, Chicago. There's a bunch of battles throughout the United States, as well as other countries like Berlin, Tokyo, Paris, a bunch of other countries and cities that have had big battles that are very, very detrimental to the way the war plays out. I would love to do that, man. I would love to. And if you guys have questions or concerns you guys want to ask me, go ahead and ask them down below. Also, if you guys join my Discord, there'll be a link down below to my link tree. Go check it out. It has my Discord link in it. But that over on Discord, there actually is a physical copy you guys can look at and read along with me. I believe that is a view-only copy too, so you guys can go ahead and check that out and read along with me as I'm going over this. I know I stutter a lot, and I know sometimes the sentences don't sound right. Trust me, they sound way better on the book. I'm just a little slow when it comes to reading, so sometimes when I read to people, I stutter. So, but if you're looking to follow along and actually know what the hell I'm talking about, that makes sense, then there's a book copy for you guys can look at it. It's not finished yet, it's still a work in progress, but like again, something you guys can read to follow along while I'm making these videos. So, with that being said, man, I love you guys. You're one of a kind, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.